identify and interpret words that help create tone. And certainly Twain has a very strong tone in this piece. So let's focus on your homework, Soapstone. All right. Group 4, can you tell us a little bit about the speaker and how that relates to the passage? Kayla?
So the speaker is Mark Twain, and he's an anti-imperialist. And so that means that he's like against war that takes over other nations. And so he's against the expansion of American land.
Okay, very good. Very thorough answer, certainly. And that lets us know a little bit more than just Mark Twain, but he is against it. He's speaking out against it in his writing. All right, and what is the occasion? Group 3, what's going on, the background context? Yeah, Brian?
During this time, this was the American-Philippine War, I believe. And so basically that was after the Spanish-American War. Right. The U.S. gained the territory of the Philippines, or the islands, and they were wanting to annex it, but the Philippines wanted independence, so there was this conflict.
Okay, very good. And who is our audience? Group 1?
From what I got from it, it's like the families of the soldiers, because they keep referring to like cover our young soldiers, like overlords do this for our young soldiers. So I'm thinking that it's more than likely the families of the people who are sent off.
Okay. Certainly the families, Hunter?
I would say also like the people that support the war, because he's talking about all the bad things that are coming from the war, since he's an anti-imperialist. So I'm talking to like the imperialists that like support what's going on.
Okay, very good, very good. How does yellow journalism play into it, if it plays into it at all? The word that I asked you to pick.
Well, the first cases of yellow journalism in America were when the Spanish-American War was over-sensationalized and kind of glorified into this picturesque conflict with no real consequences on the American side, and it was talking about how like the men were dressed in their sharp new uniforms and they were proud, and the families were all crying, tears of pride, but they weren't thinking about all the negative things that were going to happen.
Right. And so yellow journalism was promoting war, sensationalizing it, and giving it the support from America that it needed to continue. Very good. So what purpose does Twain have in writing the war prayer? Group 5. What is he trying to achieve by?
I think he was trying to draw awareness to kind of the over-sensationalized picture of what had been drawn by America during this period.
All right. Yeah, very good. Yes, Alexis?
I also kind of got how it was, I felt like a kind of hypocrisy, like he was kind of putting out hypocrisy in like the church, because they were like praying about like mercy and love, but they were also supporting the war.
Yes. And so the purpose of the church is not to hurt or to destroy, but by praying for war, certainly. That's played up. This is a parable, which, as you know, is a story with a lesson usually featuring humans. Fable is featuring animals. And it's also a work of satire. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. The subject of this piece is anti-war, right? What is his tone? Group 2?
Well, his ostensible tone, if you're just not looking at the context, just looking at the text, at first it's very kind of fiercely joyful, and then it transitions into this very abruptly when the stranger arrives into this very solemn, it's almost kind of grisly. But when you look at it kind of in context with the developments of the time and such, it kind of becomes very pointedly kind of criticizing that mentality.
Yeah, and I would use the word scathing from yesterday, and it's very harsh and bitter and critical. Okay? And when we talk about satire, first, what is satire? Let's define that before we talk about the two major types. Jake?
It's a piece of, I guess, media. I don't know how to describe it. It uses humor can kind of ironically point out problems in society.
Okay, very good. Using humor to point out flaws. Alex, is that what you were?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we add anything else to that definition? Okay.
It uses it in a way that it makes it easier to talk about and discuss.
Okay. Yeah. Oftentimes, it's done in a way that it makes it easy for us to talk about serious issues that otherwise are hard to approach. Okay. All right. Can you think of any other aspect of satire that we can add to that definition? Okay. This is a definition that I want us to work off of, and it includes much of what you've already said. A work that attacks human vice or foolishness using irony, wit, and sarcasm for the purpose of bringing about change. Okay. Now there is a lot of humor out there that makes fun of maybe a serious situation, but it's not necessarily to bring about change. Satire is intended to bring about change. The War Prayer, for example, Twain is trying to bring about change, right? He's trying to teach a lesson, trying to change minds. A Modest Proposal is another example of kind of that classic satire. Can you think of any examples of modern satire? Jayla?
Saturday Night Live.
I think it's a great example, and specifically, what part of Saturday Night Live would you say is satirical?
There's skits
Okay.
about like presidential candidates. That's
Yeah.
a huge thing.
Yeah, especially in the last year and a half, it seems to have become much more political and satirical, right? As they comment on the foolishness and vices that they perceive. Yes, go.
The Colbert Report.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. And that's an interesting type of satire because Colbert is pretending to be Republican, but he's actually making fun of Republicans. Yes, Alex?
People who do like stand-up comedies, like they usually bring in issues.
Okay. All right, and again, it's humor, but it depends on the comic. Are they trying to affect change? Are they trying to bring about change? So that is part of it. Now, what is Twain satirizing in this work? And I think we've already commented on it and its purpose, but can we pinpoint exactly what he's making fun of or he's attacking? Yeah, Jake?
America's romantic view on the Philippine-American War.
Or war in general, right? The fact that going to war is a glorious thing. You want your child to go to war, right? And you're proud of that, and you hold that over your neighbors who maybe don't have children who go to war. Yeah, absolutely. There are two types of satire. I wanted to mention this to you, and then we'll move on. You have your Horatian satire, which is a form of satire based on the Roman satirist Horace. And it is more of good-natured SNL type satire, okay? It still criticizes, but it does so in a lighthearted way. And then you have a much more critical, darker, harsh satire, the Juvenalian satire, based on Juvenal, another Roman critic or satirist of the time. And a War Prayer would be that kind of satire. It's not so much lighthearted and humorous as it is harsh and critical. A Modest Proposal would be another one, okay? And here's some examples. I just wanted to show this to you before we get started with group work. Headlines from yellow journalism. Crisis is at hand, Spanish treachery. You can see how that these headlines are sensationalized, and the language used is very much emotionally charged. Awful slaughter, Spanish ships on our coast. And I think part of the reason why, that played into the war is because it these appeals to fear, right? That something bad was happening. And it started, the reason why it has yellow journalism is a name. There was a cartoon called The Yellow Boy. And both these major newspapers fought up over the Yellow Boy to get him the cartoonist because it was very popular, and so it moved from then on. We knew it as yellow journalism. All right. Okay. In your groups, I'm going to divide. You'll have assigned to you a different part of the War Prayer. in your group, I'd like for you to assign somebody to be the discussion leader, somebody to guide the discussion of the group and keep everybody on task. And then 1 to 2 members focusing on primarily diction, and to also be responsible for looking up any words that they're not familiar with. And then 1 to 2 members focusing primarily on syntax and the rhetorical devices. Do answer the questions for your group, write them down, and then prepare to switch groups in about 12 minutes. And you're going to teach what your group discussed and what you wrote down to everybody else, okay, in that group. Any questions? Yes. Yes. Yeah. And that.
Okay, so I think you're saying that it's like super typical that live that their country will win while there's only 3 of us in the job. I read a point that they actually treated the courts and also about words. So biggest graders and taking into account how many people are also in the or
we discussed the questions.
Okay, so saying how what happened in Prague.
Okay, well, let's just,
And then
you guys want to reread the multi-fact function?
The diction is almost a little exhausting because I keep reading this like fine and glory. Wonderful things. I feel like I can like stop the breath. You know, when I'm like reading in my head, it's like. Important details. Really, just a lot of glory and honor. It's a great word. And then kind of the religious fervor and passion and joy about this.
Poly means multiple. A means without, yes. Oh, okay.
Everything would be asked for our spirit of love.
That's right, yeah. You kind of slows it down. It's not just one word.
So like the words, yeah, like kind of something's gonna come more meaning than they.
Yeah, they hold you away.
Under it says local devices, you find paragraph 7.
Sorry, she did 3 Yeah, you don't need to find it. Two or three.
Right, and then your father, watch over, comfort, encourage, bless, shield, strong with his prayers.
Yeah, and he's like
Not
just
knowing.
saying it
Being-
and not actually thinking what he's meaning. Yeah, because you would think that you'd want your country to win, and then what he do is saying
Bless them and shield.
Aim, protect, and strengthen.
Whose views are like the left side?
Yeah, I don't try to say
Yeah. That.
Mhm.
Rhetorical questions, would that be considered when he says, God's servants in your organization where it has cause and God, is it contrast to?
Yep. And he certainly uses lots of rhetorical questions in this section because he's trying to lead his audience to some kind of conclusion.
Yeah, it's like, or family died in no person.
Probably like.
So how might the appearance of the stranger in paragraph 4 be dispersed? Well, he's dressed in a way where he looks kind of out of place, you can say.
What is that?
They're in church, and he's there with the robe that
That is great also.
I intended for you to look hammered, look at something like that.
They're praying.
You don't really know his condition, you don't really know.
Photography is then looks actually like body parts and stuff. Yeah.
It also says he has solemn eyes, and this time is what we're probably happy that they're working on. They're excited for it, they probably solemn eyes.
So let me just make sure we have the right information.
That's what I was,
It's like, it's
yeah. But how does he have like an exclamation, like in the middle of a sentence, and then continue with load?
Oh, yeah, that's confusing. Maybe it's like, you know how
Okay,
they
so
say,
yeah, so people in the church, the congregation.
See, the only word that rhymes is like never.
It's in the middle of a sentence. You can't put that at the end if you didn't know.
Yeah. You're the whole sentence.
We're talking about the never left.
It's funny the corner of the evolution, like there's a big name for something that word, the big name, and then they're like, I don't know, this is crush the
It could, but we probably
I'm gonna say like,
devices are for everyone.
Okay.
maybe I'm just saying
Like one range.
And we'll have to-
oh, okay, I thought you were like, I was just saying.
Okay, what would he is repeating? I guess it'd be repetition, but it's like fervently, silently, ignorantly, that's
Yeah.
Girl, you're smart.
All I can say is like, the rest mostly is all
It's a bit of
that doesn't even make sense.
emotion, credibility, not just him as the character making it, but it's Mark
I
Twain
mean, I
saying
think
this.
it's surprised you, but
This is
it
the
doesn't
truth
really
of
look
God, not just.
I mean, it's a televised, so it has to be.
Holes.
And there's this really powerful metaphor
It's a
right
bit
after
ironic,
the words
like the
smoke,
actual
the
like
house
when we
was
take
shot,
it
like his words are like
saying,
lightning.
it's a little ironic.
And you know, it kind of gives the imagery of him being a messenger.
Okay, raise your hand if your group is not finished and you need more time. Okay. A little bit more.
what am I praying? They're not praying.
Yeah.
Is it like giving me a wish? Like, what do you want? Please take this away from me, or please.
Yeah, there's only 3 of you, so try to work this out somehow.
Yeah, like, I don't think, lot of people don't take into account like what their prayers are asking.
So one of them I the stranger is
The
the one
idea,
that
if you look back at like all of history, the idea of like basically God is not new. It's just the irony is that they're sending them. I mean,
So it's like people
Talking about as the stranger walks
it's
in.
like you're gonna pray for you and like you're not gonna take into account where your prayer could be.
They're not getting the sense of reality. I feel like he represents.
They don't know, yeah.
Coming to.
Like we're not doing.
I've heard gonna go in and take it out. Yes, but like, I guess the pastor doesn't even know.
You actually they can experience it.
Exactly. Okay, so they're like,
America's
exactly. Must work out to get someone to go back, so he like died. And he's like,